Welcome to our webinar, Connect with Emerging Leaders. We are so happy to have you here today. We were doing a poll while we were waiting to see who's here, and it looks like we have a great mix of people. So I'm just going to share those results from you. We have a lot of people from Central Ontario, Southwestern Ontario, Eastern, and also some people from the North, which is great. So if you're here and you're new to ONN, welcome. We're a provincial network of representing over 58,000 nonprofits and charities. We're focused on policy, advocacy work, and services that strengthen our nonprofit sector. If you're already a member for ONN, thank you so much for your support. We hope that you're able to enjoy this webinar and also use some of our other membership benefits, such as our new networking opportunities, fall webinars, and your $150 discount to Nonprofit Driven. If you experience any technical difficulties during this webinar, please feel free to give us a call and we'll make sure to work on it right away. Our phone number is 416-642-5786. Now, we're still waiting on a few people to join the webinar, so what we're going to do is we're going to open up a poll for you guys to fill out, and we'll start in a couple minutes. So if you're just joining the webinar right now, we are doing a quick poll to see what you would like to gain from the webinar while we wait for some of our other attendees to join on in. Wonderful. It's great to see a wide range of what people are interested in. So our hope is to be able to cover all of these topics over the next hour. And if you have any questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to write them to us and we'll be covering them at the end and do a bit of a discussion period then. Before we get started, I would like to do a land acknowledgement. ONN recognizes that we are on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the New Credit. This land has been stewarded by many Indigenous peoples for time immemorial, including the Wendat, the Haudenosaunee. Toronto is also part of the Métis homeland and is home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. Now I'd like to introduce to you Alistair, who is our speaker today. Alistair Woods is a senior policy analyst at Ontario Universities. Here he focuses on experiential learning, skill development, and training. He has spent his career in Ontario's post-secondary sector. One of my favorite highlights from Alistair's experience was that he served as a policy advisor to 2 Ontario cabinet ministers, where he held the files of skills development, training, post-secondary innovation, apprenticeship, and digital government. Alistair was also an experiential learning student himself, and so now he's a bit of an expert and a large advocate for experiential learning opportunities. So again, if you have any questions for Alistair throughout, please feel free to message us. And if you want to share what you're learning on social media, feel free to tag Ontario Nonprofit Network at O_N_N. Off to you, Alistair.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here today, and it's really great to be able to talk to you folks a little bit about experiential learning and how that can help you as a nonprofit and what students across the province can bring to you through experiential learning partnerships and opportunities. So I guess in terms of our agenda, we want to talk a little bit about what experiential learning is, try to clear up some misconceptions about it. A lot of people often assume, well, first of all, people don't really know the term experiential learning. And then when we sort of say, oh, it's hands-on learning, a lot of people often say, oh, okay, internships, co-ops. But we want to talk a lot about the kind of flexibility of experiential learning opportunities that are available to you as nonprofits in partnership with universities across the province and how you can benefit from those. And we want to talk about those benefits in terms of learning how emerging leaders can improve your impact. So what can these students bring to you and your organization via their skill set, their knowledge, their experience, via an experiential learning partnership or a project that you do in partnership with them. We want to discuss some of the obstacles that are facing your nonprofit. We want to address some of the common obstacles and perhaps hear from you what other obstacles you might have that haven't been addressed to sort of bringing on students or to working with them. Discovering how to connect with emerging leaders. We'll go through a little bit of a tour of the Propel Initiative website, which is the project that I'm on, aiming to connect not-for-profits and small businesses to experiential learning partnerships, talk about some of the resources that can support your team that are available, and then kind of wrap things up with an interactive discussion where we can answer your questions. So the first thing that we want to do is talk a little bit about what is experiential learning. So like I said, the term experiential learning often has a variety of meanings. Even amongst universities, there can sometimes be disagreement over what is and is not experiential learning. And so the term itself broadly speaks to practical hands-on learning opportunities for students. So, this is multi-format. There are variations in how long experiential learning opportunities are, whether or not they take place inside or outside of a class, and whether or not there's compensation or how much involvement an external organization has in whatever project or experiential learning partnership happens. It's something that's increasingly prioritized by government and institutions for student success. So we'll talk a little bit about what students get from experiential learning, but I'm more interested in talking about what you can get from it. But we do know that governments of all political stripes, as well as colleges and universities, are very keen to give students those practical hands-on learning experiences so that they're work ready. And one way of doing that through experiential learning is working with external partners, kind of like not-for-profits, so that we can get a sense of what are the skills that are needed by the sector and how can universities do a better job of preparing students with those skills to help you grow and to have a stronger impact in your sector. And like I said, it's often done in partnership with employers and external organizations. Doesn't always happen that way, but one of the things that universities are very keen on doing is building those partnerships and bringing more and more external organizations like yourselves into the experiential learning partnership process. So I talked a little bit about how students might be able to benefit from experiential learning, but we want to talk a lot about how they can benefit you and how a non-for-profit organization can benefit from experiential learning. So experiential learning has different formats and that can meet the unique needs and circumstances of your organization. And so I mentioned oftentimes people associate it with internships, co-ops, and work placements, which are forms of experiential learning. But there are other options that I think aren't as explored by external organizations or utilized by external organizations, and actually would be really, really beneficial, in particular to not-for-profits. So things like service learning, so that's where students kind of team up with a not-for-profit or a community organization to take an entire class that is created sort of in tandem with the external organization. The service learning portion is that they do some stuff in class, they do some stuff out of class, and everything kind of builds off of everything else. And so the theoretical parts of the class, the kind of sitting in your seat and going through a lecture, is informed by the external partners and the work that they do, in the same way that the external work that students engage in is informed by some of the theoretical concepts they're learning in class. So a very good example of service learning would be there are programs in which students work with local libraries to create literacy programs or English as a second language programs for new immigrants. And so they spend interval times in class and out of class working with local libraries, applying information theory and applying immigration and refugee studies to some of the projects that they're doing. In-class projects, so these are things in which external organizations might work with students on an in-class project. Often it works as a capstone, so usually students at the end of their studies might have a final class in which they're sort of integrating all of their knowledge and their skills from their program into a specific project. Increasingly, universities are leveraging these capstone projects as an opportunity to collaborate and assist outside organizations, whether they be small businesses or nonprofits. And we do have an example that we'll talk about a bit later, which is a personal example from my own experience in grad school. Hackathons, so oftentimes these can get associated with, computer coding and engineering, but hackathons are increasingly used in all disciplines to solve business challenges, different kinds of problems that organizations and nonprofits might have. And so again, it's working with an external organization to have a sort of competition in which teams of students, sometimes with mentors, work on trying to develop a solution to a very specific kind of problem, whether that be a problem facing your organization or a sector or a business. The other way that students and experiential learning can support you is the students themselves bring up-to-date knowledge, they bring fresh perspectives and specialized skills. So oftentimes experiential learning often gets pigeonholed into the STEM disciplines, so science, technology, engineering, and math. And while STEM students have a lot to bring employers, we also know that fine arts students, liberal arts students, professional studies students, social science and humanities students actually bring the transferable and the soft skills that are more valued by employers, even though employers aren't always good at articulating that. I was just saying before we were starting that oftentimes we do surveys of employers to ask what they want in the public sector, in the private sector, in the not-for-profit sector, and oftentimes we hear, I need someone who is creative, who can problem solve, who's good at collaboration, communication, giving presentations, and we have a wealth of students who are capable of doing that. But we're trying to work with external organizations, faculty, and students to make sure that everybody knows that those skills are being taught and that students are bringing those skills from their studies out into the real world. It can also serve as a talent pipeline and recruitment tool, especially for organizations that have a limited sort of HR capacity or limited financial resources. You can bring students on or work with students on a project and end up having those students continue on with you as an employee or continuing on with you in other ways. It helps you to build long-term relationships with universities beyond experiential learning. So we know that many external organizations can benefit from the infrastructure that universities provide in terms of space for events, for laboratories, research, all of that stuff. And universities are more than open to continuing those partnerships, and EL can be the door through which you begin that. And then the last piece I'd say is, especially for not-for-profits where staffing might be small and human resources capacity might be very challenging, it can help help free up other human resources to work on different projects while you give students an opportunity to get their foot in the door and try some of the other sort of pieces of work that you need done that a student can assist with. So the next thing we want to talk about is, how this sort of experience can benefit students and how working with you through experiential learning, you can develop students into those leaders that the sector needs. So, the first piece, of course, is that EL provides work experience so that students can build their resume and get that work experience under their belt. I think that that's one of the most important things that students are looking for. They want to have that opportunity to gain some experience so that when they get out into the working world, they can say, well, actually, yeah, I've been in school for 4 years studying international development studies like I did in my undergrad, but I have had a working experience with this organization over the summer, or worked on a consulting project with X organization as part of my capstone. And that's a way for them to show that they're kind of ready for the working world. It's also a way to assign projects that exercise, refine, and build their skills and competencies. So for university students especially, we're getting a lot better at doing that hands-on stuff of taking those skills and really refining them and building them. But I think we could be better at that, and one of the ways that we're trying to be better at that is to be able to work with external organizations. So again, students can get that real-world experience to apply in-class concepts to a real-world problem. It also has an opportunity to expose students to the nonprofit sector and the career paths that are in there. I think coming from my own experience as someone who studied international development and then went back to grad school for design, I think having the exposure to the different ways that students could work in or with the nonprofit sector would be really helpful. I think there's a lot of confusion about what jobs are available, what jobs aren't, whether or not it is a sustainable and fulfilling career path, and I know that it is, and I know many of you on the webinar also know that it is, and so we want to expose students to that opportunity. And finally, I think it is in sort of a specific relation to working with nonprofits. I think it can inspire students and increase their understanding of the importance of civic engagement and community involvement, so that even if they don't continue down a career path in the nonprofit sector, perhaps they continue in a volunteer role, or that they see the value that your organizations are bringing to their communities and want to find a way to contribute beyond sort of in a professional capacity. So what are some of the challenges to working with students? I'll talk about, oh, yes. So we do have a poll, and so we'll actually have folks fill out that poll first, and then we'll get into talking about some of the challenges.
Great. So if you can just fill out, we're just trying to see what do you think are some of the biggest challenges that you either currently face, you have faced in the past, or maybe that you're concerned with when working with students. Okay, so we'll leave this open for 10 more seconds. Most of you have voted, so we'll just wait for the last few to be able to vote. Wonderful. So it's really interesting to see that there's definitely some very common challenges between the group here. So the top one is that it takes too much time to hire and onboard, which we hear a lot as a really frequent concern. The second one being unpaid work takes advantage of students. And then lastly, it's simply too expensive. So Alistair, can you speak to maybe how we overcome some of these challenges?
Yeah, for sure. So I'll try to address them kind of one at a time. So in terms of it taking too much time to hire and onboard, that's something that we hear a lot from nonprofits and small businesses. We know that there is such limited capacity on kind of the HR side and sometimes on the financial side. That many organizations don't engage in experiential learning because they think that it's going to be too much of an investment that they can't really make. And so I guess a few answers to this. I think the first thing is to recognize that the organizations that would benefit most from experiential learning are exactly the organizations that struggle with these obstacles. So not-for-profits and small businesses. In a recent RBC survey that was released last month, this was small business specific, but they found that one of the #1 challenges amongst sort of the organizations surveyed around experiential learning was simply that small businesses do not have the capacity or feel like they don't have the capacity to work with students. And I imagine the same is true for nonprofits. That's what we hear and what we heard when we were working on the Propel project. And so, I'm going to be able to go through the Propel website and show you some of the resources that are available, but we want to fill in that gap. And so the good thing about Propel and the good thing about experiential learning is that a lot of the legwork often falls on staff at universities in terms of experiential learning department staff or career services staff, who are the people who make sure that all the paperwork is filled out, that everybody understands their roles and responsibilities, that students are meeting your needs. They can help you with writing job postings, posting job postings. I just went through an experience where we hired an EL student for the summer to help with the project that we'll be talking about a little bit later. And we went through York and Guelph and other schools where we were able to work with their really simple, user-friendly recruitment systems to look at resumes or to post a job, to look at resumes, to be able to pick students to interview, to schedule interview times, and to get back to those students with our decision. In terms of some of the other pieces, I think the second answer was that unpaid work takes advantage of students. This is something that I'm very, very concerned and very attuned to. So in a previous life, I worked for my students union at the York Federation of Students for 2 years, and then I worked at the Canadian Federation of Students for 2 years as well. And so I would never want to advocate for a situation in which students are being taken advantage of for work that would otherwise be paid. And there actually are pretty firm rules around what work can and can't be paid. And universities often set their own internal policies as well on ensuring that students don't engage in any unpaid work. I believe it's OCAD University that does have kind of an internal policy that a lot of the experiential learning or a lot of the job postings that they will put up on their career services website must be paid because they recognize that fine arts students in particular are A, less likely to have those opportunities for paid work, but B, are more likely to be seen as students who can engage in unpaid work because for whatever reason people believe that art and design is something that shouldn't be compensated. And so OCAD is very firm about making sure that employers understand the value that their students bring and compensating them accordingly. But the other thing I'll say is that there are kinds of experiential learning opportunities that are definitely unpaid. So in-class projects, service learning, sometimes hackathons are unpaid. It depends on whether you want to give a prize or any kind of compensation or recognition to a winning team. But I wouldn't say that this is taking advantage of students, particularly if it's coming in the context of working on sort of like an in-class project or being done in tandem with their learning, but simply trying to integrate sort of the in-class learning of students with kind of the outside world and the real world problems that your sector is facing. It's interesting because one of the options we said is, it's not beneficial for my nonprofit, but it's better for for-profit organizations. And I find it interesting to kind of read that, because for-profit organizations are the ones who should be most likely to have the resources to compensate students and bring them on. But we know that small businesses don't often have that, and not-for-profits are similarly challenged in terms of the resources. And then in terms of the last question, I think it was it's too expensive, we know that, again, it can be expensive depending on the format. So maybe you do have to pay a student because it's an internship or some kind of paid co-op, or there's a lot of anxiety around paying insurance premiums and things like that. And we'll get into to those other challenges and how we can get around them. But one of the things that we want to do with Propel, and we'll show you a little bit later, is we want to show you the funding opportunities that are available to you. So there are tax credits, there are grants and bursaries available through government industry associations that you can apply to. And there are many that are for not-for-profits specifically, in recognition of the fact that you have more limited resources than for-profit organizations. So we'll move on, and if you have any other sort of thoughts about challenges, I would encourage you to kind of put a question in the question box, and we'll address it when we get to our discussion portion. So again, we talked a little bit about the obstacles of recruitment and onboarding, so limited finance, HR capacity, and other resources. And there's also a bit of a lack of awareness around how can we adapt the student's experience through an EL partnership to your organization's needs. One thing that we hear over and over again from lots of organizations is a lot of confusion about legal rights and responsibilities. Is a student intern an employee? Are they not? What's the intellectual properties sort of value of something that a hackathon creates? Who owns it? Who doesn't? Who gets to benefit from it? As well as that there's not enough time to share opportunities to students across numerous universities or colleges. So Ontario has about 1 million university students, and so we want to try and give all the students a chance to have experiential learning, but when we limit ourselves to thinking about experiential learning solely as internships or co-ops or work placements, then it does seem that there is not enough time or resources or space to give everyone that chance. But because of the flexibility of experiential learning, because it can be an in-class project, a hackathon, service learning, even community-sponsored research or community-driven research, we know that we can actually meet that target of giving all those students at least the opportunity to do it. And part of that is raising awareness of experiential learning and what that can do for not-for-profits and community organizations in particular. But all of these concerns are valid. All of these concerns are very real. There's a lack of resources, in particular for not-for-profits and small businesses. And so we developed Propel as a way to address that, and we're going to be able to go through the website and kind of show you what resources and tools are available that can really help you to deal with some of this recruitment and onboarding. So some of the best practices to overcome these obstacles. So even though a student through an EL opportunity, so if it's an internship or a co-op or a work placement, even though they're not technically sort of an official employee, it's important to treat them like an employee, like you would any other employee. So thinking about the health and safety policies and programs that you might have in place, ensuring that there is a formal hiring agreement. So if you were to engage in any kind of EL opportunity with the university, you'd have to sign a partnership agreement with the university, but you would also need to have a formal hiring agreement with the student if it is kind of a work placement or an internship or a co-op. Some organizations want employees to sign confidentiality agreements, and so you would want to have a student do the same if you're bringing them on as kind of a day-to-day presence in your office. The other thing that we would stress is really don't reinvent the wheel. There are internal and external resources at universities and in your own organizations to be able to save time and money. And so I had kind of mentioned that earlier that you can really leverage and lean on the experiential learning department staff of universities who do a lot of the legwork for you and makes the recruitment and even the entire process of sort of recruiting a student, hiring them, doing the paperwork, managing them, onboarding them, evaluating them if you have to, because in some EL opportunities you will have to be part of evaluating the student's performance. Just lean on the resources that are available, because there are so many resources that are available that can make your experience so much easier and actually kind of lift a weight off your shoulders of feeling that you have to carry that. And then, of course, we want you to align interests during recruiting and onboarding. So one of the biggest misconceptions of EL is that the benefit only goes to the student, and therefore the external partner has to kind of abide to anything the student needs, wants, whatever. But the best experiential learning opportunities happen when there is that alignment between what your organization needs, between its circumstances and its goals, and the student and the opportunity that you're engaged in with university. So teach the students how to complete whatever job you're bringing them on to complete, but also teach them why it makes an impact and why it's important for your organization. It is a learning opportunity for them, but they get more out of it when they feel like they're not just being brought into an organization or working with an organization as a bit of a dog and pony show just for the sake of it. If they feel like they're making an actual contribution to the work that you do that makes an actual impact in the community, they're going to feel more motivated and get way more out of it, and of course be more productive and helpful for you. So just wanted to talk a little bit about success stories. I decided that I would bring an example from my own life, because it's easier for me to talk about my own experience than to tell you about some nebulous story of some student somewhere who did something great. So I'm a graduate student at the Ontario College of Art and Design in the Strategic Foresight and Innovation program. It's a bit of a fancy name for basically a program that kind of integrates design thinking and business thinking and futures thinking into solving problems for organizations, nonprofits, businesses, and government. And so it's got a 2-year course component followed by, we call it a major research project, but pretty much a thesis. And the final course that you take sort of integrates everything that you learn in the program into a capstone project. And so the way that the program has aligned this is really interesting and very neat. Your final capstone project is that you work with a nonprofit or a social enterprise and kind of offer consulting services over the course of a 4-month period to help them address a very specific challenge that they're facing. There is a process for external organizations to apply to be part of the class. From what I understand, it's pretty popular. And the organizations that are successful in their applications get to work with teams of students over those 4 months to deal with whatever challenge they're facing. And so I was on a team that worked with a social enterprise that works with new immigrants as well as other newcomers to Canada in sort of developing business skills, particularly in the catering and food industry. And we worked with them over the course of 4 months to sort of figure out what were some of the big challenges that they were facing in terms of their growth. What were some of the ways we could help them reframe some of those challenges and get around them? And the final deliverable is sort of a presentation and a strategy document for that organization. I would say in terms of the involvement of the external organization, we were really blessed to work with an organization that was really awesome, very responsive. But even then, you know, we only needed to meet them sort of a handful of times over the course of the 4 months. We would have kind of sit down working sessions with them. We'd follow up via email and phone call on other pieces. And so the involvement from the organizational side, I would say, is certainly not as involved as an internship or some other kind of experiential learning opportunity, but I feel like they got quite a lot out of it. And they're allowed to kind of take that strategy document and use it for whatever purpose they see fit. So I think it's really important to stress that This was specifically for nonprofits and social enterprises because OCAD believes very strongly in giving back to the community and also recognizing the limited sort of capacity and resources and circumstances that your sector faces. Often thinks that it's a really great opportunity to be able to help students apply their learning in a real world setting to have an impact on organizations that are doing good work in their communities. Now that's kind of a big project to think of, like, oh my goodness, are we going to get a student to come in and do a whole consulting thing? But again, it doesn't necessarily need to be so massive. There are many other ways that emerging leaders can bring value to your not-for-profit. And so just some other examples that we have thought of in terms of what kinds of work experiential learning opportunities can give to yourself and students. You can bring students in to build and lead volunteer advocacy campaigns. You can have students sort of plan some kind of engagement or fundraising event. You know, business and marketing students are very good at this particular kind of experiential learning. For students who are perhaps in the fine arts or doing graphic design, they could design an annual report or a giving catalog for your organization. Students could complete a feasibility study for new programs and market opportunities that maybe you're trying to explore but don't feel like you have the time to really delve into without that extra help. As well as building and implementing new social media strategies to grow your network reach. So students, all students, I would say, are fairly digitally literate and are very good at being able to leverage the platforms such as Twitter, Facebook, and new platforms that I don't even understand because I'm starting to feel a bit old myself, to kind of get your message out there to the world. And so I guess I wanted to end off this presentation before we get into the discussion piece of taking you a bit through the Propel website, because we kind of talked about, you know, what is EL, what are the benefits, what are the challenges you're facing, and Propel was designed specifically to promote and support EL with not-for-profits and small businesses. And so it serves two purposes. The first is it's an online resource hub. So we're going to go through some of the resources that are available for you to help you deal with onboarding and recruitment, evaluation, understanding your legal rights and responsibilities. But the second piece, which I think is more important, is it can connect you directly with local universities and the EL departments there. That you can kind of begin that conversation of, hey, I'm interested in this and I'm wondering how I might begin to have a conversation about working with a professor on an in-class project or bringing on an intern or perhaps organizing some kind of hackathon with students in a particular program. And so Propel was built by the Ontario Nonprofit Network, the Council of Ontario Universities, York University, and the University of Guelph, and it's supported by the Government of Ontario through their Career Ready Fund. And we're going to be spending the summer with our own EL student to kind of think about beyond fall of this year, what does the website look like, how are we going to keep it going and updated and fresh, and of course we'll always be reaching out to your sector to hear what more you need in the future. So I'm just going to go on the website now and show you very quickly what is available. So it's propelinitiative.ca. And so when you go on, you'll get to the homepage. We have a very cool little video here that can give you a bit of an overview of EL and what Propel is and how it can help you. And then you can just kind of go down and see what are the benefits to employers and students. We'll have sort of a constant updating newsfeed here of different organizations and different ways to engage in EL. I was just saying before we started this presentation that Carleton and the Ottawa Symphony Orchestra have teamed up to provide EL opportunities for fine arts and music students, which again is a bit of a novel way of thinking about experiential learning, and those are the kinds of stories we want to highlight to show organizations like yourselves how this can be beneficial. So I won't go too much into what is experiential learning because we already have, but if you just scroll down, you can kind of see all the different forms of experiential learning. There's a little bit of a blurb on each. And there is another section we'll go to where there's a bit of a collapsible area that you can go through each of the big kinds of experiential learning, get more details on them, what are some key considerations. The benefits. So again, we want to talk about the benefits that you might get out of it. So we've talked about fresh perspectives, job-ready skills, creative staffing solutions, streamlined recruitment, expanding the capacity of your own employees, students as team players and very eager to contribute. We will have a case studies page here in which you'll be able to see, and again, we're going to be updating these constantly to sort of just showcase what businesses and not-for-profits have benefited from experiential learning and what they're saying about it. Because one thing we heard from both sectors was that they didn't hear enough success stories or didn't have an opportunity to hear success stories, and there are plenty that we want to share. So we have a whole section here on how experiential learning works. So from the very beginning of getting started to evaluation, again, we won't go through the whole gamut here, but on the side you can see that there is a whole toolbar of, what are some experiential learning opportunities? And so I said, there's some collapsible areas, more details, what are the key considerations you might want to think about if you want to use hackathons, for example. Then finding a student, so, some tips on building and maintaining an EL partnership, working with students. So we talked about onboarding and how difficult and onerous that can be. And so we've got some tips and tricks as well as resources that are going to be available, for you to leverage. And that's under our resources page. So I'll just show you here. So on our resources page, we have funding supports, templates and examples, partner toolkit, and other links. So again, you can see all the available tax credits and wage subsidies that are available. So you open it up, it says, You open it up and it'll say, what is it? How much money could I receive? Do I qualify? How do I apply? And then you can kind of click to the external application. The partner toolkit is more for the purpose of promoting Propel itself. So, we would encourage you to, share these social media cards or these posters, put them on the wall in your office in case other people might be interested in learning about how experiential learning can help them. There's also a partnership flyer here that talks a little bit more about that. Something that you might find very interesting are templates and resources. So again, we have a whole variety of resources here, and this is going to be constantly updated. Every university will have different paperwork, and so we didn't want to give you downloadable forms that you could fill out and bring to any university because unfortunately that's not how it works, but we did want to show you examples of partnership and student agreements, a sample offer and welcome letter, sample job postings, health and safety checklist, confidentiality agreement, all that sort of stuff, so that you can just get a sense of what is the paperwork that you would need to fill out, what do you need, what information do you need to have ready, and what are some of the things that you need to commit to. And then of course we have external links, and that's just broken up by experiential learning, finances, legal human resources, and skills development and training. So again, these are just some other links that you might find helpful as you're engaging in a sort of experiential learning opportunity. The last piece before we get to the portal is the legal HR piece. There's a lot of information here about legal rights and responsibilities, and they're broken up into sort of partnership administration and general HR, financial and tax considerations, liability and insurance, general legal stuff, human rights, accessibility, and equity. I'll just click on one to show you what it looks like. So we have these questions that we compiled via consultation and worked with a student at Osgoode Law School, as well as the Dean of Osgoode Law School here in Toronto, to provide answers to some of the bigger questions that not-for-profits and employers have around legal rights and responsibilities, and tried to put it in as plain language as possible because legalese can be a little bit intimidating, so we wanted to make sure that the answers were easily understandable. And so the last piece that I will end off with is the Propel portal itself. So if you've been convinced by this outstanding presentation, at least I hope, that EL is something that you might be interested in or could benefit from, you can actually go straight to each department, EL department or career services department for every university in the province, and you can begin that conversation there. You just need to click on the logo. Considering I'm biased, we'll go to OCAD just to show you. And it brings you to the Ontario College of Art and Design's Centre for Emerging Artists and Designers, which is their EL and Career Services page. And there you'll be able to connect with staff and have a conversation about what sort of EL experience might benefit you, what paperwork you might need, and how you can engage in those discussions. And I would definitely say that summer is the perfect time to begin these conversations. A lot of people think, oh, well, summer is when students will be interns and therefore, there's no, we've wasted a whole bunch of time. But actually, summer is a great opportunity, especially for the nonprofit sector, to talk to universities about what EL opportunities exist throughout the academic year that might be a little bit more low fidelity, a little bit more or a little less resource intensive for you, such as class projects or hackathons, so you can begin those conversations and begin to plan accordingly over the summer. So I believe
Wonderful.
Now it's time for discussion.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much, Alistair. That was a lot of great information. So right now we want to start a bit of a discussion. So whether you have questions, comments, maybe you have your own personal success stories, please feel free to share it with us in the chat box, and we'll be reviewing them and sharing them as we go. So we do already have a couple that I would like to share. So the first question, which we got a few times, is will you be sending us a list of full sources? So I can answer that one. And the answer is yes, we'll be sending this webinar with the slide deck, which has a list of resources and the links, whether it's for funding, for HR, for all the different things we talked about today. We'll be able to share that. The second question, which is, again, another great question, is about EL. Today, you really highlighted how Propel reaches out to universities, but we know that colleges are also a great place filled with students that can participate in EL opportunities. How can we access colleges? Is that something that maybe Propel's looking to do in the future? Or do you have any advice if we wanted to reach out to college students who maybe are studying nonprofit management or fundraising or things that are related to us?
Yeah, so so as it stands right now, Propel is just linking to universities. I think there were a few reasons for that. I think one big reason is, as you've mentioned, colleges do a lot of experiential learning, and because colleges are based in applied learning, and universities are sort of, I think, catching up to that space, we wanted to have an opportunity to showcase the really cool work that universities are doing and the skills that university students in particular can bring. I think colleges themselves, just like all universities, have their own kind of EL departments. And certainly as we're thinking through the future of Propel, we're trying to think about how do we expand access to Propel beyond just sort of our own sector. And that's what the summer is going to be for on our end. And certainly it's good to be able to hear that question because it allows us to think through, again, how do we integrate other different parts of the post-secondary and training sector and skills development sector into Propel, as well as while we try to highlight the really awesome stuff that university students can bring to organizations. And I think the last thing I'll say is, I'm a bit biased because I work for the Council of Ontario Universities, but I think one of the benefits that university students have over any other kind of student, whether it be college or students in apprenticeships or training, is that university students do have those transferable soft skills that can be applied across disciplines, across fields, across organizations. Whereas I think not all college students, but some college students might have more job-specific and applied skills, even though we do know that many college students as well, those who might be studying nonprofit management or fundraising, get a lot of those soft skills as well. But I think we want to try and highlight what university students can bring, but definitely a good thing to note for us as we're thinking about the future of Propel and how do we connect you with the talent you need wherever that might be in the sector.
Great, thank you. So if you are interested specifically in college students, please feel free to send ONN an email, and we're happy to share some other links as well. But as Alistair said, Propel has abundant of resources if you want to reach out to university students. I'm going to highlight, it's not as much a question, but someone sharing kind of a tip that they've used that's been successful with EL in the past. And so what they found really helpful is if they can make a standalone project for a student, so that way if it's the student schedule, and it also makes onboarding and training a little bit easier, because as a lot of people have mentioned, the onboarding and training process can be really time intensive. And so finding little tricks to make it a little easier is helpful for everyone. Another question we have is specifically around grant making. So they say the student summer grant program I have has zero funding for extra management work and zero funding for related costs such as workspace or phones. Why don't grant makers recognize these costs for small nonprofits?
That's a very good question. One way that I would just sort of respond to that question, and perhaps you might have a bit more of a better understanding of this, is one part of what we're doing with Propel is we're actually also trying to show government and industry associations and granting organizations that not only are these kinds of opportunities needed and valuable, but that support for them is more needed. And so if we're able to hear this, hear stories like this, be able to share the success stories, but also share the frustrations and challenges of the nonprofit sector as well as the small business sector. And we've heard the exact same thing from small business, the small business sector of, yeah, we have tax credits and grants available, but it doesn't cover a lot of the administrative costs. Then we're able to share that with government. And so there is kind of a part of Propel that folds into a larger advocacy piece for us of showing government that EL is great. It's good for students, it's good for nonprofits, it's good for small businesses, it's good for everybody. But that being said, the obstacles that your sector faces are very significant and different from perhaps a TD or a BMO, and the government needs to be able to invest in the kinds of resources that you need to cover some of the costs and to support this in a more holistic way.
That's a great answer. Here at ONN, we also really believe in investing in decent work. And so one of the things when we're looking at grants, they don't maybe provide enough funds to actually deliver all of the different things that help make a decent work environment for your staff and for your EL students. And so that's something we're also advocating for, and that we can definitely share more information on post-webinar. So another question we have is about fielding placement requests. So our nonprofit spends a lot of time fielding placement requests from all the different colleges and universities in the area, but we can't partner with all of them at the same time. Is there any way for universities to coordinate with each other, or even departments within the same university to coordinate so it isn't so challenging for nonprofits and time intensive?
That's a very interesting piece of feedback. I think the best way that I can respond to that question is coordinating anything amongst the 20 universities can be very challenging, but all I can say is that this is a piece of feedback that actually I haven't heard before, and is definitely something that I would love to take back to our office and to our team, and to talk to our members, our universities about it. Obviously, it's easier said than done because universities are kind of big beasts in and of themselves, but trying to get that sort of coordination is difficult. But if it seems like it's becoming if that lack of coordination is becoming a burden upon not-for-profits, then I certainly think it's a thing that we need to address. And a part of Propel is trying to perhaps have, rather than fielding requests, having employers and nonprofits reach out to universities that they want to reach out to, whether it be because the university is local in their community or because the university specializes in something that they're doing, as opposed to you having to field a gazillion requests from universities and colleges to try and get placements.
Wonderful. And we have a question that kind of follows up on that, about maybe finding one place. And so they were wondering, is there a place on the Propel website where partners can post their own student opportunities? Or is it that you connect to the partners to reach out directly to each institution?
So you connect to each institution and then you can post it on there. Unfortunately, this actually comes back to that whole coordination piece. Unfortunately, we're not able, at least at this point, we're not able to kind of create a centralized system where you post it and then it kind of goes out to all the universities, which is why the portal takes you to each university. We have worked with each university, though, to ensure that if an employer or not-for-profit does reach out, through Propel, that the process should be very quick and painless and seamless. It shouldn't be a bit of a logistical nightmare for you to just post a job. And so you'll notice when you go on the website and you go to the different links for the universities that many of them have developed separate pages that are actually very, very simple and easy to use to be able to say, here's my contact info, here's what I'm looking for, and you should be able to get stuff posted relatively quickly.
Great. So if anyone has any more questions, please feel free to write them in the question box. We just have one more left, so I'll do this question. If anyone has any more, please jump on in. So the question is, how long is a traditional unpaid EL placement, and is it normally full-time or part-time?
So unpaid, so the way the rules work around unpaid EL experiences are that certain EL experiences can be unpaid, but they can only be unpaid if it's part of a student's academic program. So if you're just kind of posting an internship for the summer, it cannot be unpaid. Oftentimes, things such as the more common types of unpaid work or unpaid EL experiences are practicums, so for like social workers and nurses, so people who have to actually fulfill a certain amount of hours in the field to be able to get a certain kind of certification from a professional association. But what I would say is typically those things last usually anywhere from sort of 2 to 4 months, so like a semester. But in theory, the kind of EL opportunities that your sector would be engaging in shouldn't be unpaid unless it is a requirement of a student's program. And there, at least off the top of my head, there are very few programs that would require that kind of unpaid internship. And I guess just catching something that I said before is there might be kinds of EL opportunities that you engage in that do not compensate students, so in-class projects or things like that. Again, those would probably be around 4 months. A hackathon can be, in terms of time investment, maybe like a month or so, but it's really just a 1 day or a couple day thing. But in terms of like internships, co-ops, and work placements, those are the unpaid kind, are the ones that are more restricted to professional accreditation and not necessarily just posting a job that is unpaid.
Wonderful. So it seems that we've gone through all the questions today, but if you have any more, please feel free to email us at ONN, and we're happy to share the questions with Alistair and get back to you. Thank you so much, Alistair, for speaking today. The information was really helpful, and we loved having everything in the context of how it relates to nonprofits.
Thanks for having me. Thanks everybody out there on the internet.
And thank you, of course, for coming in. And again, please feel free to stay in touch. You can reach us through email, or you can also follow us in our upcoming webinars through our website, through our email channel, and also through our social media. Have a great day, everyone.